Hey, this is DeadTurin here, lead playtester for Black Magic Labs, and today we're going to preview our second deck of our Thursday double take. I'll take that. First one was Sneak Attack. This one is going to be Rogues again. However, we've added a red to the deck. So the reason why I did this is for EMBERCLEAVE, because I was playing with this Trickster guy in the Sneak Attack deck, and I took their EMBERCLEAVE, and then I proceeded to beat their face with this in EMBERCLEAVE, and I realized how powerful that combo was. So we'll get to those cards in a second, but we're just going to go over what's in this deck here. It's very similar to the Sneak Attack deck. We're going to run a little bit less tempo and a little bit more just rogues down your throat. So first we're going to start with Bloodchief's Thirst. It's 1 black with a kicker of 2 and a black. You destroy target creature or planeswalker with converted mana cost 2 or less. If it was kicked, you destroy target creature or planeswalker instead. This card would be insane if it had instant speed. At sorcery speed, it's still good. It's really good kill spell, but it's just not instant. This deck is a little slower than the Sneak Attack deck, but it has a little bit more pop to it in some ways, so it's a little different. But I like this card a lot. I think it's a good card. We have, of course, the Guild Enforcer. As I said before, this is one of the best rogues in the deck. It's a 1/1 flash for 1 black, and whenever another rogue or it enters the battlefield, each opponent mills 2 cards, and then as long as you have 8 or more cards in your opponent's graveyard, this rogue gets +2/+1 in Death Touch, so it gets beefy pretty quick. Now, a new addition to this deck over the Sneak Attack deck is Robber of the Rich. It's 1 in a red for a 2/2 reach haste. The reach is important. It does help us against a lot of decks. Having that extra guy that can block flying is really nice. And then whenever it attacks, if the defending player has more cards in hand than you, exile the top card of their library. During any turn you attacked with a rogue, well, this whole deck's rogues, so any turn you attack with a creature essentially in this deck, you may cast that card and spend mana as though it's mana of any color. So this is going to allow us a way to steal cards from our opponents and then cast them for ourselves later. You do have to attack, so sometimes you have to make some pretty terrible attacks to get a good card off your opponent. That's something just to note. This is only a 3 of because we don't want to go super far into the red plan, and the fact that we're not going to want to play cards, and sometimes we're not going to want to play cards on our turn. So we're going to have more cards or equal cards in hand to our opponent, so we won't actually be able to get to activate this ability. Though this could be 4 if you wanted, but I think 3 is really where you want, just because of the fact that we have some cards that have flash that we're going to want to play on our opponent's end step. Drown the Lock. This is a really extremely powerful counter/kill spell. It's Dimir, and it says counter target spell with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in that controller's graveyard, or destroy target creature with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of cards in its controller's graveyard. Can mill our guys out with the Guild Enforcer and the Thought Thief, and then that allows us to activate Dragon Lock. Dragon Lock is going to be really more just to counter late game action or clear the way of stuff so we can get some beats in, especially to get an unblocked rogue for the Trickster. In the 3-drop spot, we got Brazen Borrower. This is a 3/1 flying flash. Can only block creatures with flying for double blue and 1, but the main reason why this is in here is for the Adventure. It's Petty Theft. We turn target non-land permanent opponent controls to its owner's hand. So if our opponents gain control of something of ours, it goes to our hand. Otherwise, it just goes back to their hand. This helps us add some tempo to the deck. Also, it gives us a flyer that can attack in and get in unblocked for the Trickster. Then next, we got Baragoth Blood Sky Sire for 2 and a black. It's a 2/3 Death Touch. This is in here for its boast ability though, because 2/3 Death Touch for 3 is really bad. It's a legendary creature, so we're only going to run 2, but its boast ability is for 1 and a black. Target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles that library and puts that card on top. As we talked about in Sneak Attack, you can use this in tricky situations to get your opponent to search for a card and then gain control of that card later through the Trickster, but predominantly we're going to search for a card. This is going to allow us to search for either the Trickster here or for EMBERCLEAVE. We don't really need a lot of search in this deck. It's going to be more of taking our opponent's stuff and just playing our rogues, so we're only going to run 2 of this card. Nighthawk Scavenger, 1/3 for 1 in double black. This is probably one of the most powerful cards, rogue cards in the deck. It can get up to 8 power. Its power is going to be equal to 1 plus the number of cards in your opponent's graveyards that are different card types. There's creature, instant, sorcery, land, artifact, enchantment, planeswalker. I think that's 7, so you'll have 8 total power. Otherwise, Flying Death Touch Lifelink is pretty good, so it can get in, it can get us life back, and it can trade with anything our opponents throw at us that isn't indestructible, so that's pretty nice. The card this deck is revolving around is Zareth San the Trickster. It's Dimir and 3 for a 4/4 flash. Also, it has Rogue Jitsu, so if you ever played back in the days of ninjutsu, it works very much the same as that. For 2 and Dimir, you can return an blocked attacking rogue you control to its owner's hand. You put it onto the battlefield from your hand, and it's tapped and attacking. So it's going to automatically get through, going to do damage, and then whenever it deals damage to a player, you may put target permanent card from that player's graveyard onto the battlefield under your control. This is very similar to the other deck. We have taken a few cards out just to make room for the Robber the Rich, but this card with this card, Embercleave, is dumb. This gives you double strike. Each time that card is going to deal damage to your opponent, you're going to get to take another card. So you can take 2 cards. And a lot of times, if they don't have a blocker that has at least 5 health, so say it has 4 or less, you're definitely going to get to take 2 cards, which is real nice. And it adds for extra sneak value, because with 6 mana, which isn't too hard to achieve, you can switch out one of your flyers, or just maybe an enforcer or robber that went unblocked, and you can then throw this in, and then throw this in, and then it allows you to just pop them for 10 surprise damage, as well as take 2 things from their graveyard, which is extremely powerful. I've won games just instantly from being a losing cause, attacked with something I knew they wouldn't want to block, or something they just can't block because it has flying. But I've done that, then they're like, okay, we'll let it go through and we're going to kill you next turn, and then I pop out this guy and then, you know, take something of their things. And that's just really insanely powerful. This has, it costs 1 less for each attacking creature you control. It also has flash, which is nice. It's double red and 4. When it enters the battlefield attached to target creature control, equipped creature gets +1/+1 and double strike and trample, and it's 3 to equip. So if you attack in with 4 creatures, you pop one of those back to your hand, put the Trickster out, 2 more mana, that's 6 mana total. You can then pop Embercleave on the Trickster, hit in for a surprise 10 damage, as well as get 2 cards from their graveyard that are permanents. So that can be very tide changing, especially if you're just attacking with a bunch of chumps. So then as far as the lands go, we got 1 of each basic, an island, swamp, and mountain. We got 4 Clearwater flip lands, 2 Temple of Deceit. The scry and the having the dual lands is very important in this deck, as we are going to want to play double red out of the side and double red out of the main, as well as play double black and double blue out of the side. So we really want to play all doubles. So we're going to need a couple of these dual lands that aren't the flip lands. That's why we have the 2 Temples of the Deceit, 2 Temples of Epiphany, and 2 Temples of Malice. So the scry action does help us find our Embercleave and find our Trickster. And a lot of times people don't expect Embercleave in the rogue deck. It really throws them off. And I think it makes this deck real powerful, because this can become an 8, this can become a 4, this can become a 2, 3, 4, depending on how many of these you got out on the board. So all our guys can have significant attack power, and with Embercleave that leads to a nice devastating finish. We got 2 of the Riverglide flip lands and 2 of the Blight Step Pathway flip lands. We don't need red as much, so the flip lands for the red black are going to be minimal, whereas we really need black and blue, so we're going to have all 4 of those. We also are playing 2 Crawling Barons. This is a little greedy in a deck that needs double black, double blue, and double red, but 2 actually is pretty good, and it allows you another creature that you can attack with, which is always nice. I've won a couple times by throwing in Embercleave on a Crawling Baron, so that's always fun when you have a nice Crawling Barons you've built up, and all of a sudden Embercleave's dropping in there. Don't know what to do about it. So that's great. This fact that this is a land, there's a lot of cards that say non-land permanent, and this is a land that becomes a creature that we can put Ember Strike on. So having 2 of the deck is actually really good. You could cut this if you want to go for a little bit more balanced mana base. I'd probably add 1 more of these flip lands each, but I kind of I like it. I think it fits. This does have for 4, you know, you put 2 counters on it. I've talked about this land a lot, and it becomes a 0/0 creature. As always, just remember, if you're on your opponent's turn, don't make it a creature unless you're going to block, and if it's on your turn and you play an attack, don't make it a creature unless you've already put 2 counters on it, otherwise it will die to Heartless Act. As always, you got to remember those kind of things about this, but I'm going to keep saying it because I think it's really important. I've seen too many people misplay this land and lose because of it. Glasspool Mimic, this is a nice card to the deck. It's a land on the flip side, otherwise it's a clone. It becomes the copy of any creature on the battlefield that you control, except for it's a shapeshifter and it's a rogue. So generally we're going to either copy a Soaring Thought Thief, an Enforcer, or a Scavenger, as this is legendary and this is legendary, and these are not really often worth copying. It's really nice when you have 4, 5, 6 Thought Thieves out, and they're just rallying the team, getting a lot of rogue action and a lot of mill action at the same time. That's always really nice. So this card is really nice, fits in well. I would want to run more than 2, but the mana base just is real restrictive because we're playing 3 color and we're trying to play 2 Crawling Barons. So you could easily take out this Black Bloom Rogue over and put another Glass Pool Mimic in, but I kind of like this one as it has Menace. So this is a 2/3 Menace for 2 and a black, but as long as your opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, it gets +3/+0, and it's a land on the flip side. Then we have one of the Mauling. This could be taken out as well, but I do like having a 9th kill spell in the deck. It kind of helps tempos out, as well as having a land on the flip side. It's a land that's not dead later on, so that's always nice. It costs 1 less. Your opponent controls no basic lands. I've not seen a deck that doesn't run basics of some sort. I mean, and the ones that aren't running a lot of basics tend to be control decks, so that usually is irrelevant. It's usually a 4 mana kill spell, which is not great, but it's also a land, so that makes it a little bit better. Agadim's Awakening. It's a bolt land on the flip side, which is always nice, and then it's returned from your graveyard to the battlefield any number of target creature cards that each have a different converted mana cost X or less. So we can go one of these, one of these, one of these, and then if we can get all the way up to 8 mana, we can also bring the Trickster out. Generally not. Generally we'll only have 6 mana at the most, so we'll get a Enforcer, get a Thought Thief, and then a Scavenger, and that's usually pretty good for a lot of mill, as well as a lot of power on the board. Now to the sideboard, of course, since we're playing a mill game, we are going to have some Crypts in the graveyard to get rid of their graveyard should we need to. Negates for the control matchup, we would maybe take out Drowned in the Lock or Chief's Thirst, maybe if they're not running a lot of creatures, and then we'll bring in Negate just for a good hard counter against control deck. Thassa's Oracle is for the mirror match, so that we can win the game if their mill strategies are better than ours. Bring in the Oracle, and we can then use their mill strategy against them, and with the Awakening it allows us another way to pull it if it did go to the graveyard. So that's pretty nice. Kroxa, this is for the mirror match as well as against control deck. Just the fact it makes them discard cards, which is what control doesn't want to do, and it's a reoccurring threat. It's pretty good. This Titan's really good. It's nice and balanced. I think this is the way they should have approached the Simic Titan. I think it would have been a lot better if that card wasn't so insanely powerful. It'd still be in standard right now. We could still have some fun with it. Instead it's banned, and this card, while it is powerful, it's a super powerful card, it's not broken. It's very fair. I think it's right where you want to be with power level. A card that comes in, does stuff, and can come back later and do more stuff while being on a big body seems pretty strong to me. And then Extinction Events, if we're just getting outclassed by a deck that maybe has more powerful creatures, Extinction Event is very nice, especially if they're playing a lot of evens, as we don't have a lot of even creatures. We have a little bit more than the Sneak Attack deck, but not too bad. So that's the deck, and we'll see how she plays. As always, like, share, and subscribe if you like this video. Also, please consider supporting Black Magic Labs on Patreon. Thanks.